Tonight, the race for the White House, just days away from the South Carolina primary.
Make sure you go tell everybody you know that they need to vote in this primary.
The latest from the 2024 campaign trail. Plus, the UN pushes for a ceasefire in Gaza, how the U.S. is responding to the war between Israel and Hamas. And educational freedom in Arkansas.
I think the state of Arkansas is charged by our Constitution with educating kids. It doesn't say educate them with a public school education.
How school choice is opening the door for families to find the right fit for their kids. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Nikki Haley doubles down on why she's running for president. Good evening from the nation's capital. I'm Jenna Browder. With the South Carolina primary just days away, Haley says she is staying in the race for the Republican nomination. In a speech today, she promised to keep fighting until the American people close the door. Her announcement coming as former President Trump remains the clear frontrunner despite his ongoing legal battles. Washington correspondent Caitlin Burke joins us now with the latest on the 2024 race for the White House. Caitlin?
Jenna, Nikki Haley says she's not going anywhere, at least not until after Super Tuesday. With another 20 states set to vote between now and then, the Republican presidential candidate says she's in no hurry to hand the nomination over to Donald Trump.
Some of you, perhaps a few of you in the media, came here today to see if I'm dropping out of the race. Well, I'm not. People have a right to have their voices heard. And they deserve a real choice, not a Soviet-style election where there's only one candidate and he gets 99% of the vote.
Despite trailing Trump by more than 20% in her home state, Haley says she's playing the long game.
I've always been David, taking on Goliath. And like David, I'm not just fighting someone bigger than me. I'm fighting for something bigger than myself.
Adding that her focus is on how to make America stronger, Haley is pledging that no matter what happens on Saturday, she will still be running for president on Sunday.
I'll keep fighting until the American people close the door. That day is not today, and it won't be on Saturday, not by a long shot. The presidential primaries have barely begun. Just 3 states have voted.
Trump, meanwhile, spent the weekend campaigning in the battleground states of Pennsylvania and Michigan. In brushing off his latest legal defeat in a New York civil case that resulted in a $355 million fine, Trump vowed big changes if he wins in November.
When we win back the White House, we will have no higher priority than ending the weaponization of this horrible legal system that has developed around us. It's a horrible, horrible thing that's taking place. You talk about democracy. This is a real threat to democracy.
A new campaign finance report reveals Trump's legal fees cost his political fundraising committee more than $50 million in 2023. And according to Politico, the former president's campaign also spent more money than they brought in last year. Meanwhile, President Biden is bringing in a record haul, raising more than $42 million in January, even amid concern about his age. In a statement, Biden's campaign manager says, quote, while Team Biden-Harris continues to build on its fundraising machine, Republicans are divided, either spending money fighting Donald Trump or spending money in support of Donald Trump's extreme and losing agenda. Jenna?
All right, Caitlin, thank you. Nathan Gonzalez is the editor and publisher of Inside Elections and a Faith Nation contributor, and he joins us now. Nathan, welcome. So let's start right there with campaign fundraising. The Biden campaign, as Caitlin mentioned, raked in $42 million in January. This, amid several bad news cycles for the president, including the Hur report and a waterfall of headlines about his age and fitness for office. What do you make of this record haul, Nathan?
Well, this shows that there is some support for President Biden, that even though he's struggling in the polls, there's concerns about his age. There are people that want him to have a second term. They're willing to give money for that second term. Another notable piece of it is that a chunk of those donations were donations less than $200, which means that the campaign can go back to those donors and try to get more money over the course of the next 9 months. And Caitlin brought up a good point that it's not just that Biden is raising good money, but that Trump is raising money but spending it on legal fees rather than campaigning. I mean, the key is not just who can raise the most money, but who can most effectively use that money to motivate and persuade voters to come out to the polls.
Yeah, Nathan, for former President Trump, how big of a financial issue are these legal battles? Will they come to bear on the campaign, or could they actually have the opposite effect where people see him as a martyr and they start to donate?
Well, it's possible. I mean, the legal issues have helped him in the primary with Republicans. It's helped galvanize his support. I think that's a different calculation in the general election, where independent voters who don't think Biden's doing a great job, but they're concerned about the circus that always seems to surround the president, concerned that he'll be tied up with legal issues in the campaign and into his presidency, and they just don't want to deal with that. And fundamentally, again, that money. The money is the key to driving your message and driving your narrative and trying to get voters to focus on the issues that you want them to focus on. And I just don't think Trump, he doesn't want, I don't think you should want people to focus on him in the courtroom, because that is ultimately becoming about him and not about what's best for the country and what's best for the people in the country.
Now, you mentioned money driving campaigns. Nikki Haley, she still has a lot of it in her campaign. She says she will not drop out of the race until the American people close the door. Nathan, what do you think that cue is for her? In all of the primaries so far, voters have spoken pretty definitively. South Carolina not expected to be too different.
Right. The money is helping her stay in the race. She can sustain a campaign. She can still put up TV ads. But fundamentally, she is selling an alternative to Trump to an electorate that is not interested in an alternative, that a majority of Republicans are fine moving ahead with Trump in the 2024 election. So by the time she's making the case that only a few states have voted so far, which is true, but by the time we get through Super Tuesday, we'll be close to halfway done. And I think it will be even more clear that there is not an appetite with the Republican primary voters, one other than former President Trump.
Yeah. Nathan, just about 30 seconds left, but today Senator Joe Manchin said he would not endorse Joe Biden for re-election. Just a final thought on that.
It's kind of weird because he said that he doesn't want to help Trump get another term. But ultimately, I don't think there are a lot of voters who are sitting around waiting for Joe Manchin to tell them who to vote for. So I think it's a little bit silly on Manchin's part, but I'm not sure it's really going to matter for the election.
Okay, Nathan Gonzalez of Inside Elections, good to see you. Thank you, Nathan.
Good to see you, Jenna.
Well, the White House says it is preparing major sanctions against Russia. The move comes in response to the death of Alexei Navalny, the opposition leader who campaigned against the Kremlin. The White House says there isn't an official determination of death, but the responsibility lies with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The details of these new sanctions will be unveiled Friday. On Capitol Hill, there's a new bipartisan push in the House to pass funding for border security and foreign aid. It's unclear if GOP leadership will consider the Defending Borders, Defending Democracy Act. The $66 billion bill would include more than $47 billion in aid for Ukraine. The Ukrainian government says the money is much needed. Over the weekend, forces had to withdraw from a key town in the Donetsk region due to dwindling supplies. President Biden says it would be unethical for the U.S. not to provide more aid. Saturday marks 2 years since Russia's invasion of Ukraine began. Over the summer, Ukrainian forces launched a counteroffensive, a push that has stalled as Western aid has slowed. And in the Middle East, a vote calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza has failed yet again in the United Nations Security Council, the United States vetoing the resolution. CBN Washington correspondent Hillary Powell is tracking reaction. Hillary?
Well, Jenna, the U.S. stood virtually alone as this overall vote among this 15-member group summed up to be 13-1 with the United Kingdom abstaining. It reflects a continued global pressure to really end this 4-month war that has followed Hamas's violent invasion of southern Israel that killed thousands of people.
Those against?
As the sole hand raised Tuesday blocking a ceasefire vote in the Israel-Hamas conflict, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Linda Thomas-Greenfield explained the veto.
The resolution before the Council would not achieve the goal of a sustainable peace and may in fact run counter to it. Proceeding with a vote today was wishful and irresponsible.
The United States also joined other members urging the UN to condemn Hamas for taking 250 hostages and killing more than 1,200 people on October 7th as an act of terrorism.
We strongly deplore this situation and call upon the Council to rapidly clear itself of this ambiguous guilt.
The vetoed ceasefire measure comes as Israel ordered new evacuations from parts of Gaza City, vowing to expand the offensive to the southernmost city of Rafah. More than half of the territory's population of 2.3 million are in shelters near the Egyptian border.
The suffering that Palestinians are enduring is beyond anything a human being should be subjected to. A possible Israeli ground offensive in Rafah would have unimaginable humanitarian consequences.
Phaeton Albatar is in Rafah after fleeing fighting in the north. She says aid is very scarce. The U.S. maintains its own resolution would better pressure Hamas to accept a hostage deal in exchange for a temporary ceasefire.
This temporary ceasefire is critical to getting aid into the hands of Palestinian civilians who desperately need it.
This is the third U.S. veto of a Security Council resolution demanding for a ceasefire. The 22 Arab nation group could next take its resolution to the overall UN General Assembly, where it is likely to be approved there, but the Assembly resolutions are not legally binding. Jenna.
All right, Hillary, thank you. Parents in Arkansas getting more choice in their kids' educational options. How it's improving opportunities for some families to seek Christian schooling. When Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. When Sarah Huckabee Sanders became governor of Arkansas, education reform became a key focus for the state. Included among the overhaul is school choice. It's now one of 14 states that let students use state money to go to private schools. CBN contributing correspondent Paul Petit brings us the story.
The halls are bustling at Providence Academy in Rogers, Arkansas. The private classical Christian school is at capacity with 580 students. 71 of those students are enrolled to the state's new school voucher program.
There were like a bunch of different schools to see like which one would be the best fit. And then there was just like something like a sign from God, like something that like Providence just had. It had like a sign that like, whoa, this stands out above all the other places.
Kira is thriving in the Christian environment, and her mom says she couldn't be happier after watching Kira struggle in public school.
Public school was not a good fit for Kira. Socially, academically, she did fine. Socially, it was difficult.
To hear Kira's story is it's touching. It's special. Again, to be a part of the kingdom of God and to be a part of a ministry that can invest in students in a way that impacts them potentially for the rest of their lives.
School choice programs are growing nationwide. So far this year, lawmakers in 14 states have passed bills establishing school choice or expanding existing ones. 42 states introduced such bills, according to EdChoice, a nonprofit that tracks school choice policies. In fact, the proliferation of new or expanded school choice programs has advocates calling 2023 the year of universal choice. Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders titled her new education policy, which includes school vouchers, the LEARNS Act.
Education in Arkansas is among the very worst in the country. Now, someone might argue, are we 45th, are we 48th, or whatever we are? Regardless, the reason is the fact is that we're in the bottom of education. Something drastic had to be done now.
Here's how it works. Parents of students approved for school choice are set up with what's called educational freedom accounts, which provides $6,600 in public funds per student. 94 private and parochial schools in Arkansas are taking part, with nearly 5,000 students enrolled statewide.
We were interested in participating for the opportunity to expand on our mission, which is to partner with parents in a classical college preparatory education to equip students with a biblical worldview, all to God's glory. So it meant to us more families to serve and to partner with, some of whom would not be able to participate in our programming if not for the LEARNS Act and the funding.
But the LEARNS Act didn't pass without a fight, including protests and a failed attempted statewide referendum.
Well, I think the state of Arkansas is charged by our Constitution with educating kids. It doesn't say educate them with a public school education. It doesn't say education with any particular way. And so we take that as what is the best way to educate all kids, and it's with choice and with option.
Senator Hester says the final peg of pushing school choice through the Arkansas State Legislature and implementing it with educators meant finding someone who's done it before. Governor Sanders contacted the office of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and hired away their Secretary of Education, Jacob Oliva.
Secretary Oliva was the key for passing this legislation, and he will be the key for success in this legislation.
Providence Academy and all private schools plan to give annual tests to voucher students to assess their learning. Kira's mom says what's harder to measure but evident is the way a Christian education has impacted her daughter's mental health.
She's happy. She comes out of school smiling. She has friends. She has a group of friends that she never had before, and they accept her for who she is, and they love her for who she is.
It makes me feel really good to know that some kids that were getting lost in the shuffle now are going to get to go shine somewhere else. And again, I've said this a lot of times, but every kid's not going to fit in the same box. It is imperative that we have more options that parents get the lead on.
Kira says she's glad she was led to Providence Academy.
Their motto is like building leaders for Christ. So they're building leaders for the Lord. They give you a great education, and they really prepare you for like life.
In Rogers, Arkansas, Paul Petit, CBN News.
Thank you, Paul. Well, from preaching the gospel to possibility of prison, one Central American nation cracks down on a Christian organization. The details after this. Another major college campus is experiencing an outpouring of God. Best-selling author Jenny Allen reports hundreds of students put their faith in Jesus at Florida State University last week. Instagram and Facebook posts showed joyful students celebrating baptism and worshiping. Allen wrote that 4,500 students confessed struggles with sin, and hundreds came forward to trust Christ, with some undergoing spontaneous baptism in a school fountain. An American missionary followed God's call to help lead mass evangelism campaigns in Nicaragua. Now, though, he faces criminal charges from the Nicaraguan government, and the pastors he worked with are in prison. Mark Martin has the story.
Around 1 million people attended these evangelistic campaigns in Nicaragua last year. Britt Hancock of Mountain Gateway says God did amazing things, healing and transforming lives. A couple months after the final gathering, however, the government brought charges of money laundering and organized crime against Britt, his son Jacob, and daughter-in-law Cassie.
We're totally innocent of those charges. Money laundering there has to be a crime on the front end that obtained the money illegally. And so all of the money that we put into Nicaragua came from our donor base. So there's no underlying crime there. And we certainly are not organized crime bosses.
We had been pouring our lives into the nation of Nicaragua. And so we didn't know what was happening at the time. And so we just began to pray and just began to try to figure out what was going on.
While the three safely made it home, the country's attorney general charged 11 Mountain Gateway Nicaraguan pastors with money laundering and put them in prison. They include Maricela, a wife and mother separated from her children for 2 months now.
My heart is completely broken for Maricela, just knowing that she's sitting in a prison cell away from her babies. She's like a sister to me, and she's been an aunt to my kids. She just gave birth to her baby boy at the end of September.
Earlier this year, Mountain Gateway stated these charges are based on erroneous information, and it would do everything in its power to resolve this through diplomatic channels. Britt went to Washington seeking help to secure the release of the pastors whose exact location and health are unknown.
Britt says Capitol Hill lawmakers supported Mountain Gateway by applying pressure on Nicaragua through floor speeches and a resolution condemning these actions. The missionary is also reaching out to others in Washington.
I met with high people at the State Department who are very concerned over the situation in Nicaragua. And the State Department they're telling me that they're concerned over the lack of attention surrounding Nicaragua's recent behavior about persecution against religious institutions and individuals and violations of human rights.
Religious Freedom Institute President Eric Patterson describes the situation in Nicaragua as very bad.
What's happening on the one hand is we've seen the leadership of the Catholic Church routinely attacked, imprisoned, stripped of their citizenship, and we're seeing this increasingly targeting evangelicals as well.
Britt is asking for prayer, describing what happened as a body slam.
Pray for our team. Pray that God moves to release those held in prison. In a broad way, pray that God change the environment in Nicaragua, that freedom can reign.
The kind of freedom experienced by those whose lives changed after attending Mountain Gateway's evangelistic campaigns. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Thank you, Mark. Well, a special way of honoring female service members. That's next on Faith Nation.
I am Region's first ROTC graduate student.
Finally tonight, something new for some very special brides-to-be. It's one of the most memorable parts of wedding planning, saying yes to the dress. But for a group of New Jersey brides, the experience won't come with the usually high price tag. The Camden County Board of Commissioners recently held a wedding dress giveaway for veterans and first responders. These gowns easily retail for over $1,500. But as a salute for their service and sacrifice, these brides will take them home for free. And that's going to do it for Faith Nation this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.